one. 30. Paddlers, are you ready for Token White Guys?
Hey guys.
What's up, guys? This week we have Luke Cassereau.
That's how you say it.
Luke Cassereau. Yeah, we just wanted to have you on a podcast to kind of talk about racial diversity and whatnot. So we wanted to just hear your perspective. Like, you're one of the only non-Asians on our team, and how do you generally feel about that?
You know, it's funny. I don't actually ever really think about it unless explicitly asked. To be honest, it sort of never really even crosses my mind that I'm like the only white person around. And so in reality, like, I've never even experienced it until being like, oh, hey, how do you feel about this? It's not really anything. It's always been a really open community, so I'd encourage people, sort of all backgrounds, to try it out and sort of meet the different teams in the area.
What do you want to talk about now?
Are we done talking about racial diversity?
Yeah, I guess so. Bodybuilding is an open community.
Yeah. Tell all your friends to join. Paddlers, are you ready to lose fat and gain muscle?
Hi, I'm your host Brian. This is Xiao. Today we have our friend and teammate and coach here, Luke Cassereau. Cassereau, right? Like the ones you put in the oven?
Yeah, that's pretty close. It's pretty close, to be honest. It's not that far off.
Just a couple of letters.
That's awesome.
Awesome. So you've been part of this community for a while. So why don't you just go ahead and tell us a little about yourself, how you got started, and kind of where you are now.
Yeah, well, so I started when I was 14 in high school, and that was with Dieselfish. My stepdad was on the team, and I'd been sort of dragged out to races at the time, and so instead, rather than just be watching the sidelines, I was like, oh, well, maybe I can try it. There wasn't a high school team around me because I was sort of living in the South Bay, and ultimately it became like, oh, well, just join this team. And then I sort of paddled with them for about 3 years, then started a team at my high school, and then finished, sort of graduated high school, and then went off to...
You started the Mountain View High School team, right?
Yeah, and they're still around. They're merged with Milpitas now, but they've been going since 2004. So yeah,
they were really good for a couple of years.
Yeah, they've had some great classes over a number of different years.
And that was you.
Well, we had a good group. Originally, no girls. It was like 12 guys. Like, we had 8 girls our first race. None of them had ever paddled. But we had a good group for a number of years there. And then went to Worlds at the end of high school, and that's where I met Xiao. And then went on to college and actually rode for a few years before rejoining Dragon Boat with the Cal Dragon Boat team. And then I coached there for a few years, and then graduated and sort of started grad school, took a bit of a break from actively paddling. But then, having known Xiao and also the other coach at the time, the DW, Brendan, came back to DW in 2013. And I was sort of on and off participating there, and sort of in the background, I'd sort of pursuing a new sport, which was bodybuilding, which was the first time. I'd sort of always been just sort of tall, lanky guy, and I was like, I really want to make a go at like putting on muscle, and like if I actually just focus my training on this rather than being like I'm always gonna be skinny, I'm always gonna be scrawny, like how do I like actively make choices to train this way? And then ended up doing a competition, so like a actual bodybuilding show in 2015, and then again this last summer, and ended up winning my weight class.
So if Tal's crew saw a picture of you with your shirt off, they might have to drop tech lead.
I'm not here for fighting words. I gotta get the fake tanner out first. You guys should reflect on the whole thing. It's actually been, you started at like 14 and 28 now. It's actually half my life now. I've been doing Dragon Boat or something. Things sort of related to Dragon Boat. It's pretty crazy. I just started like, oh my gosh. It's over half my life now.
Yeah. So we want to jump in a little bit and talk about your experience like doing this other sport, because we've interviewed some people who do like CrossFit or who do like weightlifting. You're the first one that we're interviewing that Dragon Boat has brought you to like do this other sport of bodybuilding, but also just reflecting on like a lot of people think like, oh, if I'm skinny, I'm going to be skinny, right? That's kind of what you were talking about. Yeah, and so you were skinny for 25 years. So it's not like, oh, I'm skinny. Like, because a lot of people are like, oh, I was skinny, right? Yeah. But they really, what they mean is like, I was skinny until I was 13 or something like that, right? Yeah. And that to me is a lot easier to like, oh, you're during your growing phase and whatnot. Yep. But after like 25, you're you're done. Like, you know, most people think that you're done. You're whatever size you're going to be for the rest of your life, basically, unless you know, follow the American Heart Association diet and get fat.
Yeah.
But you really made a turnaround and said, like, oh, even though I've been skinny 25 years, I can still do this. I can actually make a change.
When I first started rowing, I've been introduced a bit to weightlifting in general, and that was very like rowing as a sport is basically entirely leg dominant. So like I learned how to squat, and I learned how to do leg press, and that was like pretty much it, other than like a little bit of like ab work. And then sort of having finished rowing and moved into cowboy mode, my goal is like I want to lift to get strong for this sport. Like I want to lift for the sport. But then, you know, graduated and I was like, oh well, now I'm just lifting to lift. And that was fine for a number of years. I was like, oh, I'd like to get bigger. I'd like to get more muscular. But then you sort of putter around the gym. There isn't necessarily a lot of like advice. So like I was staying in shape for sure, but there wasn't any like change. And then sort of around 2013, I was like, let me rethink, like, what is it, like, I'm not progressing, like, I'm not changing, and there's this concept that you mentioned a lot of people are like, oh, I'm skinny, I'm always gonna be skinny, or I'm never gonna be, like, big and muscular. This idea of, like, oh, I'm a hard gainer. It's like a term that's used, where it's like, oh, no, I could never put on weight. I'm like, that's bullshit. You for sure can, but, like, you have to make conscious choices around it. And, you know, it's not a fast process. You have to really commit to sort of a long-term plan and stick with it. And it's not fun all the time, for sure, right? Like it can be a bit boring, and like it is sort of a longer-term commitment. But if you wanted to make a change, like that's just what you had to do. And I was like, hey, I'm gonna see if I can make this happen. And then it was like, let me plan around it and like learn as much as I can, and then just go and execute it.
I just think along the other side of the spectrum too, people who are a little bit more overweight, kind of always like, oh, I've tried all these things and I can't take off this fat, or like, oh, when I lift weights, like I get bigger and I don't actually lose my fat, and they just get into this like really fixed mindset, and what you were saying is like, yeah, that might be true. You might be a hard gainer, or you might be a hard, like it might be hard, and you're not saying that's not at all the case. You knew you were a hard gainer because like you've been 25 years skinny, but then at the same time you're like, if I make this a commitment and if I put my mind to it, you can do it. Has it always just been the way that you are, or was it just like you did some research and you're like, this is the way to do it, I know how to do it, so I'm committed to it?
Like, that's great to be like, oh, I really want to make it happen, but how do you do that isn't necessarily obvious to all people. And I think you mentioned certainly the people who are, oh, I'm already overweight, like, I don't want to gain more weight. And I think there's sort of two parts to that. The sport itself, if you actually want to compete and step on stage, it isn't just about getting big, it's also about getting very low body fat. So there are sort of those two aspects, and I think what a lot of people battle with is sort of their own body image issues and like insecurities. And like I myself, while scrawny from like high school to maybe 25, was overweight as a kid, right? And like so I sort of battled both sides of that insecurity, where I was a chubby kid, and then I like found sports in dragon boat, and then started getting very tall, and suddenly I was a scrawny kid. So I've seen both sides of that coin.
That's cool.
So I have both body insecurities. And like the sport's just like rife with me, like you basically feel crappy about yourself. But like how do you turn that into like productive action? Like how do you turn that into a healthy relationship where you no longer feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, like I don't know, like I'm not seeing the change I want to see, to a like, oh, I know how to make the change I want to see, and like I know that it's a plan that I have to stick with. And how do you then develop a much healthier relationship with your training, your body image, and like food? And I think that's a big part of having a longer term relationship with like your own body and the gym. It's like you have to have that perspective, like that healthier perspective, and it's not always easy. Right? It's you're battling with sometimes very deep-seated insecurities.
So, as a Dragon Boat athlete myself and as a coach, I've seen a lot of people who've battled these insecurities or come to us with a lot of questions, like, oh, so what can I do then, to adjust my diet, to adjust my workouts, my training. A lot of people they want to put on as much muscle as possible while gaining as little fat as possible, but they have no idea how, or they don't have the commitment to it. But it sounds like your journey through bodybuilding has kind of really taught you a lot of lessons on kind of how to safely manipulate weight, but at the same time also understand the risks and rewards of that too.
Yeah, and when I started, so say go back to like September 2013, I was probably like most guys that go to the gym, where it's like they pick up Flex magazine, they see like Mr. Olympia, and it's like, holy, like that guy's incredible, right? He's super shredded, he's gigantic, like, and they have on the front of those, like, oh, huge arms in 6 weeks, like gigantic chest in 10, like shredded for summer sort of thing. And like, at least for me, my natural inclination was always say like, oh, I'm probably doing it wrong. Like I'm probably suboptimal. There must be some trick, right? And it isn't, right? It's just, there are a few like sort of guideline rules, and you follow those as best you can and like stay within that framework, and again, sort of try and develop a healthy perspective around that. It just does take time. And that like, that's where, like that's how you make the gains. It's not a following some exact plan from someone else, but sort of trusting your instincts and learning how you sort of track and effectively manage your own progress.
A girl who like looks at a magazine and like, oh, these female lifters or these female like fitness models are looking a certain way, and it's saying like, oh, you got to do these things, and they try it and they get frustrated because like I've tried it for a month and it doesn't work, and they get frustrated and they stop. What I'm hearing you say is like, well, you have to first figure out something that you will be able to comply to for an extended period of time, and then only after you trying it for like, I don't know, what's the minimum, like say 3 months, then you can reassess and whatnot, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like a year.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah,
You have to have the sort of resilience to like follow a program for a whole year, and then reassess like, well, that piece actually worked or that piece didn't work. But if you do follow a program for a year, you're bound to find something that works for you, and then you're also bound to find something that doesn't work for you.
And I just want to add too, like I think you just gain so much more to just going through that journey, right? That you don't even expect to learn.
Right.
Like, I think you end up learning a lot about yourself, about your own resilience, about what commitment really is, just by really sticking to that year.
Yeah.
One takeaway too from what you were saying at first was, so that for those magazine photos, you're saying that they probably take maybe hundreds of thousands of photos, so they're probably deleting, just like kind of like on Instagram, right? We all take pictures of our food. Like I might be taking a picture of my coffee, but it's, you know, that's only 1 out of 100 photos that has a perfect image. And then second point is that they don't always look like that.
No.
Right? They peaked perfectly to have that body composition for that date, for that photograph, for the competition or show.
Yeah, and when you go backstage at one of these shows, you know, even then, and be like, I'm now in my contest shape, like I'm getting like the tanner on, always like the posing, the act of like looking like that on stage is very much like you're performing. I don't just look like that, like I didn't wake up like this, right? It's like a matter of putting on a show and like using sort of angles and illusions to look a certain way. And I might look my strongest that day, but when you really push it to those limits, you're your absolute weakest, and like everything in the gym's a grind. Like your sleep pattern gets screwed up. You're just hungry constantly, right? Because you get so low body fat, you have no reserves. So basically, whatever you ate is the only energy you have.
Could you explain that a little bit for I think maybe some of the listeners? So you're talking about pushing this body composition such that they look super strong on their meet day or whatnot.
Yeah.
But maybe some people don't quite understand like what actually goes into that. So you're talking about how bodybuilders might be actually a lot heavier than they are on their show date, and that there's a long process of manipulating that weight. Can you maybe explain a little of that?
Yeah. So like when I started my whole this sort of journey, it was like, okay, I'm about 190 pounds. And it's like, I'm not going to be large enough to be competitive, even at an amateur level. So it's like, I need to build muscle. So I ended up bulking up to upwards of 242 pounds. I think it was the heaviest I ever saw on a scale, which would have been February of 2015. So it's quite a long span, but at the same time, like it was a pretty aggressive bulk. But then you have to lose it, right? Because like at that point, you're probably somewhere north of 15 or near 20% body fat. Like, and on show day to actually participate in these competitions and do well, your goal is like sub 3, right? Essentially the minimal lowest you can possibly go. Yeah. So to push it that far, you have some people will try and be like, oh yeah, you only need 16 weeks. And that's what again, going back to that's what a professional does. That is what a professional does, but they often are using diuretics or other compounds that make that process a lot easier. So you try and diet over 16 weeks and you just won't get lean enough, or you'll get lean so fast that you lose muscle. Because inevitably in bulking, you gain some body fat along with your muscle. And in dieting, you lose some muscle with your body fat. So, fast forward to this year, I dieted for 6 months. So it's like, all right, well, I'm going to do the slow process. And so I started dieting basically January 1st, and my contest was June 19th. So I dieted for 6.5 months. Basically, I was always, and it's, the exact strategy, it's not like I'm always deprived sort of thing, but you're right that it was a commitment, and that you do sort of slowly knock the weight down, where it's like, I'm trying to lose 1 or 2 pounds a week.
What have you learned from bodybuilding that you want to bring back to the Dragon community?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways I found, no one wouldn't benefit from being stronger in the boat, right? Especially for their own, if they're adding lean muscle mass, right? Like if you add a lot of weight, like, yeah, you might be stronger, but there's some trade-off in just amount of weight gained. But if you do it in a smart way and you're building muscle, there's no way that doesn't translate. I think the way I had sort of personally seen it, from strictly the gym aspect, bodybuilding tends to be very isolated, or tends to use a lot of isolation exercises. Like while a powerlifter is going to train a lot in the compound movements that they need for the meet, or a weightlifter, a bodybuilder is trying to do, sort of head-to-toe development. And so a lot of that ends up being if I really want to isolate the chest, I'm not just going to do bench press, right? There's a lot of body parts involved in the bench press. I'm also going to do chest flies or dumbbell work. And because of that, I found there were a lot of muscle groups that I started developing that then actually made my bench just naturally stronger. I didn't do a lot of flat bench in general because I was bad at it, right? And it's like, hey, this isn't going to be effective for me developing muscle because I'm just crap at this lift. Right. But then, sort of as the contest season ended and I got back to the off season, I'm like, oh, well, I'd really like to develop some strength in that. I hadn't done it in a year because I was doing this contest prep in which it didn't feel effective. But then having spent this time doing these other isolation exercises, well, my chest is stronger, my triceps are stronger, my shoulders are stronger, my upper back's stronger, bench is a lot easier now. I got stronger there in a compound movement, not by directly targeting it, and it's maybe not as effective as directly working on it, but at the same time there are benefits there to compound movements, and that every individual muscle that's part of it should be getting stronger. So that's where I've really seen the Dragon Boat that I didn't do a lot of cardio with bodybuilding, but I'd hop in the boat and the application of force in the paddle was effortless. It was very easy in that I'd spend all this time getting stronger and developing just more work capacity in the muscle.
I do remember when I was first starting with powerlifting and everything, and I was just thinking how can this relate to dragon boating? I remember having a conversation with Luke at the lake where I was saying, I think weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting might be a little better translating into dragon boating, which may be true, but what...
And so you're saying clean and jerks and snatches.
Clean and jerks and snatches and those things. But what he was quick to point out as well, which I didn't realize at the time, was, and I completely agree with, is that any type of strength that you're adding, from whatever you're doing, it can't not help on the boat, right? It is going to translate. If you're, if you added 100 pounds in your squat, 100 pounds in your deadlift, 100 pounds on the bench, it will make you a stronger athlete on the water. With that said, I have noticed that by going on cycles or using accessory time to do more bodybuilding isolated movements, it does allow me to get stronger in those compound lifts as well.
A bigger muscle is a stronger muscle, and a stronger muscle is more useful in the boat.
Alright, so we talked a lot about bodybuilding in general, how maybe some dragon boaters may be interested in just training, gaining muscle, losing fat, that type of thing. Went into your journey a bit. I think one thing we didn't quite address yet was how a lot of people who are new to just going to the gym in general might have a lot of misconceptions about bodybuilding or powerlifting or what it means to go to the gym.
Mm-hmm. And
I think that plays a big role into that intimidation factor of I step into the gym and all of a sudden I don't want to go anymore. Do you maybe want to talk a little bit about what is bodybuilding, what isn't it?
Yeah, I think ultimately bodybuilding really comes down to again sort of a whole body workout, not necessarily in one session, but rather over the course of the week, I'm going to train every part of my body and try and progressively over time lift more and more weight. But I think sort of the big difference there for maybe say someone who's doing Olympic lifting or powerlifting whose interest is I'm really interested in how much weight I can put on the bar and how I can successfully do a rep. for bodybuilding, your muscle really doesn't know what's on the bar or what's on the dumbbell. Your muscle only knows how much force you're requiring of it, right? Like if I'm doing a bench press, my body only knows how much force I'm exerting. It doesn't know at all what's on the bar. There's a professional bodybuilder, Kai Green, who has this, he actively says, he's like, I'm never gonna be a weightlifter, I'm a bodybuilder. And because for him, it's about how hard can I contract a muscle? Like how much force can I apply? And I don't care at all what weight it is. And
I think a lot of people perceive bodybuilding as a sport where they're full of themselves. They just want to look at themselves in the mirror and be like, oh yeah, look at how good I look. But I think for you, that's clearly not your reasons for doing it.
I'm just trying to see what can I achieve, right? And it's more about self-realization, being I set a goal that I'd like to push my own genetics to whatever their limit is, and I want to see how close I can get to that limit. And that tends to, at least for me, is a very positive interaction where I'd say like, oh, what can I create? What can I develop through basic perseverance and hard work? When you're in the I'm about to step on stage phase, that starts, for me, becoming a little bit harder to maintain that balance, where it is a little bit more of how do I look right now? How am I close? Because then I'm have the perspective of, there's this external validation of what I did, right? I'm being judged. And I'm looking at what does someone else think of my physique rather than, and that doesn't really matter in your journey, right? For me, the more powerful part was I know I've improved. I know I'm able to lift more. I have a better connection with the muscle, and I've learned a lot. And that's very empowering because it's about my own internal reference point where I'm thinking about where I was, relative to where I am now versus what does someone else think? And ultimately, that's the part I think that I don't actually love about the competition aspect, and that it does now depend on what does someone else think, and who cares what they think? I know I improved, right? Like that's, and I think once I've learned to have perspective around that, then it doesn't really matter where I place in a contest. Like yes, I did well, but who cares, right? Because for me, the validation was I set a plan, I worked hard, and I improved myself in a way that I intended to, and I think that's much more empowering. But it's easy to lose sight of that, right? And I think that switch towards the focus on both the internal and the training session, as well as sort of the longer term goals, is something that's missing for a lot of people who first start out with I want to change my physique, right? Because they're thinking about I'm envisioning how someone else thinks about it. But in reality, you're not setting yourself up for success when that's the goal.
For someone who wants to build a physique, I want to build a physique to see if I have control over my body.
Yeah.
Right, because for a lot of people, my body is just this other side of myself and this other thing of me. Whereas, I think if you're really self-actualized, your body is you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if your body stops functioning, you die. Right, so do you have control over your?
You telling me this now? After I went out last night hold up.
Right, so a lot of people, and so you're saying it's about self-actualization. It's about, do I have full control over my body and my genetics?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like a lot of people, it's almost like that bodybuilding competition, but it happens every day for them.
Yes.
It happens every day for them when they step in front of the mirror.
Yeah, and I think
that's scary.
And you look, and you look back to when I decided to make this choice. Actually reflecting on it now, I want to be a bodybuilder. It was because my body's disappointing me. I'm not getting what I want out of it. Right. And then ultimately, I'm gonna do whatever I can to change it. But then the lesson learned there was I have control now. I know the cues that work for me. I know how to manipulate things and be fully actualized, right? And know how I'd like to gain muscle, or I'd like to lose a little weight, and you learn the rules that work for you. And that's as you mentioned, that's sort of the journey and the process that you learn a lot from. You learn a lot about yourself, and that is why it is a sort of always individualized, right? What works for one person isn't going to work for everybody, in terms of specifics.
So I think people are dying right now. What are those rules? Right? So you're telling me there are rules about okay, if I want to lose pretty much only muscle or only fat, I can lose pretty much only fat. If I want to gain pretty much only muscle, I can do that. If I want to I don't care, I just want to get more muscular, I can do that. So there are rules to that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what you come to learn as a natural bodybuilder, right? Someone who's I'm not going to abuse pharmaceuticals. You can't purely gain muscle. You can gain muscle with sort of minimal fat, and you can lose fat without losing too much muscle. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't don't also appreciate that you like, oh, I'd like to get shredded. It's not trivial to lose weight, but it's certainly harder to lose weight and keep all of your muscle, right? To be like, oh, I'm going to only lose body fat. That's actually the really tricky part that I think really differentiates high-end bodybuilders versus those who are sort of still coming along. Like, you look at the best athletes in the sport, and this, sort of lessons learned from them. They have a way of like, oh, I can selectively lose body fat. I can get like really low body fat, but I still have all my muscle, and that's tricky. And I think that takes a lot of experience. And that was what was sort of the big difference for me in the contest side. But the lesson learned for the general athlete who's only using bodybuilding as a tool for their own training is if you want to lose some weight, there are consequences if not done properly in terms of your strength and performance, right? Like you will lose muscle if you're like I'm just going to lose a lot of fat really quickly. And in the same sense, I'd like to bulk, I'd like to gain muscle. It does take time, right? If you rush it, you're going to gain a lot of body fat too. And like ultimately, yes, you might be stronger, but are you stronger relative to your weight, right? And like the first time I bulked so quickly, like I couldn't do pull-ups anymore, right? Because like I gained so much weight. Like my upper back strength, I could do more on the lat pull down, but then my weight gain outpaced like that strength gain, right? And so I think in terms of specifics,
which brings it back to dragon building, right? Like it's good to gain muscle and it's good to gain strength, but at the same time, like if you're not doing a pull-up,
yeah,
that's really good dragon mode athlete, right?
No, right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm producing more force, but am I relative to my body weight? And in that instance, it certainly wasn't, right? Whereas now if my peak weight was say 242, I'm about 30 pounds lighter now, but stronger than I've ever been.
Some takeaways I took from there that I think really apply to dragon boating. So 2 pieces. One being that as an athlete, as a dragon boater, I have to ask myself the question, am I aiming to just look stronger and shred it? Am I looking to actually get stronger in performance, or maybe a little bit of both? Mm-hmm. And the second thing that you mentioned a while ago was the whole mentality piece, right? Where when you're on stage, it doesn't matter what other people are thinking. It just matters like how you feel about it. And that goes with a dragon boat race too. Like however you perform in race day, however you perform in practice, you dictate that. It doesn't matter where the other boats are. So I think as a dragon boat athlete, focusing that mentality on yourself internally is much better than paying attention to the outside noise, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's really what's made, as I've matured through the process of the sport, really the difference for me, where it's more my goals are refined around my own body's feedback, right? Where like I'm listening to how am I progressing in the gym? How do I feel in the gym? Like, oftentimes you can say like, oh, I'm probably not eating enough because I know I'm starting to feel crappy, right? Or like, oh, I'm eating too much because like I know the scale's changing really quickly. And like learning, to one, that nothing's permanent. Like people will tend to freak out and make adjustments really quickly, but in reality, like it is sort of a long-term game. And like, how do you track that and think about that in a way that you're not making hasty decisions, but when it's time to make a change. And that comes from learning about yourself and using your own body's feedback, performance in the gym, changes in composition, that then you can make adjustments there. And that's only come from me through time and like experience and thinking about it.
Yeah, so you were saying like that, we can either bulk and like just your body can say, I'm going to put on more tissue, or we can be more of a cutting phase where your body's like, okay, let's take off some more tissue, and you can be more strategic about like, okay, I want my body to build, but it's mostly going to build muscle, or I want my body to lose and mostly lose fat. Mm-hmm. So, and there were some rules to that. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think ultimately for me, what I've learned is the bodybuilding training is there are really sort of 3 parts. There's what you're going to do in the gym, there's how you're eating, and there's how you're recovering. And you're often limited by your own recovery. So recovery is, half sort of active, where it's like I'm going to do like the foam rolling or the stretching to whatever, so that I'm ready to perform in the gym. Or I'm getting enough sleep so that like I can stay focused and like I'm gonna have enough energy. And the other side is a bit passive there, in that you plan your training around I don't want to overexert, right? Because it is a long-term battle. Like you're talking about like months at a time staying on a plan. If you have something that's exhausting you and like, oh, next time I go to lift, like say I'm gonna do bench press again, I can't because I haven't recovered yet. that's not a win situation. Like you have to scale back. So recovery is often sort of those two elements. And training is ultimately really whether you're trying to bulk or cut. For me, it was sort of always the same, in which you're really just trying to, you pick lifts that you're good at, like you can execute well, and that cover all of your body parts, right? So from head to toe, like you're talking about chest, arms, shoulders, upper back, lower back, and your legs, right? And you're going to cover exercises that really will cover all of those areas, and you're progressively getting stronger, right? And you're often doing lifts that, it's not like a powerlifting where I care about a 1 rep max. I'm just trying to put a certain amount of load or stimulus, and then trying to increase that over time. So like the weight I did for 8 reps, a month ago, I'm now doing for 12. Or what I'm doing for 8 reps is now 10 pounds heavier. You just small increments, and I had a sort of like coach guru, his point was like, it's pennies in the piggy bank, right? Like you're adding up over time, and like you're never gonna do anything dramatic. Like dramatic is not gonna be sustainable. Like you're not gonna make huge jumps, but you just slowly progress. But then to your point about like, oh, maybe someone wants to put on a lot of muscle, or maybe someone's looking to recomposition or lose weight. Ultimately, it's really the tuning knob there is nutrition. Training for me was sort of always the same. Recovery for me would change a little bit depending on how much energy I had, whether I was bulking or cutting, but ultimately nutrition was sort of the tuning knob.
I found that like, I think, if I work out a certain amount, I'll gain a certain amount of muscle. Mm-hmm. Or if I work out a certain amount, I'll lose a certain amount of fat. And last year when I wanted to prep for a weightlifting meet, I was like telling my coworkers, I'm gonna work out so much this summer, I'm gonna work out every single day, I'm gonna build a ton of muscle, and I'm gonna get jacked, right?
Yeah.
And I got I got a lot stronger, but my body composition basically didn't change. I was really surprised. So what you're saying is like, your training can tailor towards like muscular building or strength, but at the same time, like your muscle can get bigger, but whether your muscle gets bigger while you're losing fat or whether your muscle's getting bigger as much as it can really just bows down to diet.
And the rules, I think that there aren't a lot of specific rules I think that fit for everybody, but ones that I think in general work well for just about anybody are, you need to get enough protein, and that's sort of your starting block, where there are a lot of people, not surprisingly those that sell protein powders, that tell you like, oh, you need 2 grams, 3 grams per pound body weight, and like for me that's 600 grams protein. There's no way I don't get that without like a protein shake, right? That's ludicrous. In reality, 1 gram is sort of a starting point. So like for me, 200 pounds, I need 200 grams of protein a day, whether that's from chicken, yogurt, cheese, whatever. And the other parts are really where you then just sort of tune and fill in your calories, right? So in this case, carbs and fats. And you need enough fats, and then you really use sort of the carbs, like how much am I eating? That's really the volume of your diet. And I think for me, that was the big change where a lot of people will say like, oh, if I eat a lot of carbs, I'm going to get fat. And that is sort of the perception, right? That's like why Atkins diet goes quite well. And that's true if you're eating in excess, if you're gaining weight too fast, but then it goes back again to you make adjustments based on how fast you're growing. So what I would suggest to someone is like, oh, I really want to add weight, weigh yourself a few times a week, average that out, and say like, oh, am I, over the course of a month, did I gain 1 to 2% of my body weight? If you did, good, you're right where you want to be. If you stayed the same, you have to eat a little bit more. And I would look at first, am I eating enough protein? Because most people don't. And there are a lot of terrific sort of fitness trackers and apps and sort of websites you can use now to just look at what is my daily consumption of things. And just having a picture of what am I putting in my body is good for anyone to get baseline, even if you want to stay the same, right? Like, do I have a balanced nutrition? Sometimes that can be hard, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to go to lunch, that sort of thing, but a rough picture. And then from there it's like, okay, well, what if I'm gaining too fast? Well, scale back your calories. Like, oh, well, maybe instead of having 2 cups of rice, I have 1 cup of rice. And like, you see sort of where that lands you in another month, right? And then similarly, like, oh, well, I'm staying the same. Maybe I add a little bit. For the weight loss, really, it's a matter of, you don't want to lose weight too quickly if you care about performance, especially for a dragging motor or someone who's doing, this is really only in the context of another sport. It's going to be critical that you maintain performance. I think that the 2 indicators for that are, 1, the scale, is it dropping too fast? And 1% is roughly the safe, sort of half to 1% of your body weight is sort of the safe amount. So for me, again, the 200 pound example, 1 to 2 pounds a week it's about what you feel comfortable with that you're not losing too quickly. And then again comes to when I want to lose weight, I'll reduce the amount I eat most days of the week. But I think it's important actually not to, so we'll often do it in a way where it's like, oh, half the week I'm going to eat slightly lower, maybe a bit more exaggerated, but then the other 3 days are normal, right? And so it allows your body to sort of recover. And then when like I had a really heavy squat day, or like a day in the gym that I just knew was a hard one, I'd make sure it landed on a day in which I had normal food, right? And like that sort of thoughtfulness around how am I training, maybe I have a dragon boat race, like maybe I have a practice, like I really want to make sure, like you can fit dieting in around that, but it doesn't negatively affect how you're training. And the other side of that again is your performance. Like if you feel like crap, like I'm just dogging it, I got nothing, everything's getting harder, you're probably dieting too quickly, right? And so again, just using your own body is the best feedback, right? Like I don't care what a magazine says, I don't care what I say about what you're doing. Your own body's gonna give you the best messages about where you are and like how you're progressing, and just like learning the tools for yourself that like, oh, my performance is improving, the scale is where I want it to be. Not that the number on the scale matters so much, I think, as much as it's an indicator of what your body's doing. Like, am I gaining, am I building tissue, am I building muscle, or am I losing, right? And depending on what your goals are, you sort of adjust from there. But so I think that, 1% gain, 1% loss is sort of roughly where you'd expect to be in a safe, sort of healthy range.
Yeah, so here, protein's pretty much stable, and then your knobs really are the fats and carbs.
Yeah, and when you're gaining, ultimately fats ends up being sort of a static point as well, like 20 to 25% of your total calories, which gets a bit specific, but somewhere around there. And then the carbs are where you really add just the calories. And when you're dieting, it's the reverse. You want to cut from carbs first. Fats are critical for just basic biological function, right? For your body to have the right hormone balance, in particular, your anabolic steroids that you make yourself, so say testosterone, those sorts of things. If you want to build muscle or maintain muscle, if you drop fat too low, your body will stop its normal hormone production, you will lose all your muscle, right? So you need a certain baseline there, and you really use the carbs as the filler. And many people will actually drop carbs even lower and add more fat because it tends to leave you feeling more full. So if like, there was a meal I sort of had in the middle of the day in my contest prep where there just wasn't carbs for like 6 hours, where I'd have an omelet, right? Because it's like, oh, that's going to be, that I was going to feel more full after that than I would ever have of like just chicken, right? Because there's a bit of fat to it. And I learned that worked for me, right? And that's ultimately sort of the discovery process that everyone would have to sort of go through, is like, what works well for you. Because I know people are like, oh, I eat cod because it's low fat, but I hate cod. I'm like, then why are you eating cod? Right? Like, right. There are a lot of people who make choices like, oh, it has to be this food. And I'd say just like the training aspect, that there's no one size fits all, there isn't for the nutrition either, right? And I think that's why I think a lot of diets, they even take that to a new extreme. Like there's the idea of sort of, if it fits my macros, it's a very sort of bro acronym, but the idea of like, I can eat whatever as long as it fits within it. And a lot of people have had actually incredible success with that, because when you're dieting, your body's already in a deficit. It doesn't necessarily matter so much. So I know a lot of people have had success with that aspect, or that as well. So I think in many ways it's right. It is what sort of fits for you, and you best if you pay attention, right?
So it is a process.
Yes.
What we're saying.
Yeah.
Just like what we're saying in the beginning, it's that commitment to taking that year, taking those 3 months, really analyzing your body, one change at a time. Like that's the important thing too. Like whenever you're studying yourself, don't change too many things at once, because then you're not going to know what's actually affecting the change. It has to be one factor at a time. I'm going to eat less rice or whatever for 3 months and see how that goes. Then I'm going to add more rice or that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think, and it does require some patience then, right?
Yeah.
And it's because people want results instantly, and it isn't. And I think you have to set yourself up in a way that you're enjoying what you're doing, because the results aren't going to be overnight. And if it's a grind and it's only for some end goal and you don't like the process, it's going to be really hard to stick to it. So I think finding ways to enjoy it and doing it in a way that makes sense to you is the ultimately sets yourself up for success.
All right, so Luke's been generous enough to actually share with all of you guys his diet plans and his caloric intake and programming and exercises he's done since like
January.
Yeah, basically
January,
it should be the run from January 1st to the contest day, and sort of how I approached. You're really singularly focused on getting contest ready.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So definitely take advantage of that. Kind of look into it. We'll probably post a link below. Am I playing the right way? Yeah, it's below, right? Link below. That wraps up this episode. We'd like to thank you for coming on the show
Thanks for having me.
really bringing such a wealth of information. We'd like to thank all of you for tuning in every other week and reading our blogs and everything on there too. Please keep spreading it, and I hope that you guys all got some value from this.
We're trying to make this a community platform, and so we want to push people to submit articles that you want us to post on our website. That's also totally legit. We're about to post our first, or we would have posted our first guest blogger. So Sally Chow wrote us an article about her experience from CAU. So if you have something that you want to share through our platform, feel free to write us a blog post, or you can want to be on our podcast also. You can do that. Check out our website at paddlersareyourready.wordpress.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like it, spread it, comment, do everything that you can. Yeah, do everything that you can below. Go crazy. Good comments, bad comments, we don't care. You can talk about how my hair's grown out. That's fine.
Shout out to Ray Lou and Mabel Lee for commenting on our last video.
Yes.
You guys are awesome.
Yes. But anyways, yeah. See you guys next week.
Peace.
Peace out.